Welcome to rSlash Prorevenge, where cheating spouses get their careers obliterated. Our first Reddit post is from wafflesareforever. Douchebag and Sarah have been like family to my wife and I for several years, practically ever since we moved in across the street from them. The four of us were extremely tight. Our kids are the same age as theirs and are all good friends. We were one big family unit. We did dinner together a few times a week. We went on vacations together. I truly saw Douchebag as a brother, and my wife and Sarah were very close too. 5 months ago, I was completely blindsided by the discovery of an affair between my wife and Douchebag. My wife had left her email open on our computer, and I saw an email from her to her longtime therapist saying that Douchebag would be joining her at an upcoming session again. WTF? My mind started racing. Why in the world would Douchebag be going to her therapy sessions without my knowledge? I did a search and found some other emails to and from the therapist proving that Douchebag had been going to sessions together with her for about 6 weeks. I checked our mobile phone account and discovered that since late summer, they had been exchanging hundreds of texts every day, peaking at nearly 500 a day by the holidays. Speaking of the holidays, my wife and I hosted both of our families, parents, siblings, etc., for both Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner. And Douchebag and Sarah joined us either for dinner or after dinner on both holidays. Text records showed that the entire time that they were at our house celebrating with our families, my wife and Douchebag were texting each other across the room. They were doing that pretty much every time the four of us hung out. For months. And, all day, every day, just in general. But what bothers me the most is that they were doing it with Sarah and I right there. I confronted my wife with the evidence, and she admitted that, yes, she and Douchebag had fallen in love. It just happened. I don't know how. But I love him, and I just don't feel anything for you anymore. I'm sorry. They'd gone on a school district trip together. Something had happened in her hotel room, and things had moved quickly from there. She explained, as I lay face down on the couch, unable to look at her, that they had already made plans to move out and divorce me and Sarah. And while they didn't plan to move in together immediately because of the kids, they'd probably do so eventually. The meetings with the therapist were supposedly mostly for the purpose of finding a way to break this to me and Sarah as gently as possible, because they were so very concerned for our well-being. Sarah and I are fairly certain that they weren't planning on telling us about the affair at all, and were simply going to discover their feelings for one another several months down the line, after they'd come up with some other reason to divorce the two of us. My wife moved out 2 months ago. I was, and still am, utterly destroyed. I cry every day. I cried writing the first few paragraphs of this story just now. I worry non-stop about the impact on our kids. But I'm also not exactly a shrinking violet when I feel like I've been wronged. And in this case, I was objectively very, very wronged. So a couple of years ago, Douchebag ran for a Board of Education seat as a pretty extreme underdog. I helped him with his campaign materials and debate prep, and my wife, a well-known school district employee, this becomes important later, got the word out as best she could. Much to our surprise, he actually won in a squeaker by just a few dozen votes. Being on the board became the center of Douchebag's world. He joined every committee that he could. This turned into the foundation of his affair with my wife, as they were constantly going to school events and meetings together on evenings and weekends. Once I discovered the affair, my thoughts turned pretty quickly to revenge. And it occurred to me that an extramarital affair between a member of the Board of Education and an employee of the school district was at least bad politics and possibly violated district policy. Making things far worse for them was that my wife was in the running for an open administrative position, and everyone knew that she was more or less guaranteed the job and the major pay raise that came with it. She had just finished her master's degree in school administration at the urging of her principal and the superintendent so that she could be promoted to this specific position. I had plenty of evidence of the affair. Texts from both of them admitting to it, text records showing that they were texting hundreds of times a day, emails to and from the therapist, etc. I considered simply emailing all of the evidence to the board and the superintendents, but felt like I, as the grieving, betrayed spouse, might not be seen as a credible source. So instead, I invented a fictitious, furious friend who was planning on showing up to the next board meeting and publicly shaming the two of them for their affair. I told my wife that I'd tried to talk this person down, but couldn't guarantee that they wouldn't show up and humiliate them publicly. As I expected, this led Douchebag to conclude that the only option was for him to preemptively admit the affair to the board. The superintendent subsequently recommended that Douchebag resign, which he did. Sarah said that he was utterly humiliated and crushed, and barely got out of bed for a few days afterwards. Once word of the affair and Douchebag's resignation started getting around, the superintendent, a longtime friend of both my wife and Douchebag, contacted my wife and tearfully informed her that it was no longer politically appropriate for her to be promoted to an administrative position within the district. The position that had been lined up for her was later filled by an outside candidate. This sent waves of confusion and rumor throughout the district, as it was pretty well known that my wife was getting the job. The day after she was informed that she wasn't getting the promotion, my wife and I, despite our crumbling marriage, took our son out to breakfast together on his birthday, and a parent stopped by our table to congratulate her on her new role. She said thanks, then excused herself to go cry in the bathroom for a while. I let the dust settle for a couple of weeks, and then, right before my wife moved out, let them in on my little secret. There was never a furious friend threatening to expose them in the first place. Just me. Word of all this has gotten around our fairly small town, which Douchebag grew up in and my wife has worked in for nearly 20 years. My wife refuses to talk to me about how things are at work right now, but I've heard from some people I know in the district that her formerly spotless reputation has taken a major hit. Douchebag, formerly a gregarious social presence in our neighborhood and at events in pubs and towns, has completely gone underground and barely emerges to mow his lawn. He's moving out soon to a sucky little townhouse, which is all he can afford due to all the child support he's going to have to pay his wife. My wife and Douchebag claim that they plan on trying to make things work together, despite all the public humiliation. I wish them lots of luck with that. I'm sure it will be a lot of fun to show their faces together in town. So, who else out there is imagining OP hooking up with Sarah and the two of them living happily ever after while spending Douchebag's child support? Because I know I am. That would be the perfect ending to this pro-revenge. Our next Reddit post is from Might As Well. So this story takes place like 5 years ago when my husband and I were broke college students with a young baby. We worked hard to afford our sucky little duplex, $600 a month, and necessities, while trying to finish our degrees to one day get ahead. Our duplex was one in an entire neighborhood owned by a large company and managed by a super sketchy married couple who lived on the same street. Before our kid was born, we did the normal excited new parent thing of painting his nursery and decorating, blah blah blah. Our lease stated we needed permission to paint, which we obtained from the property manager, the husband of the couple. He insisted it would be fine, and being young and naive, we didn't get it in writing because he was so chill about it. So we paint and move on with our lives. A little while later, our lease was up and we had given notice to vacate as we were moving closer to my husband's school. The property manager was understanding, everything was fine, and we scheduled our move-out inspection. Prior to this inspection, we specifically asked him for the name of the paint color we needed to use when repainting the nursery. He flat out refused to give it, saying it was unnecessary to paint as we'd been there for so long they'd be painting the whole duplex anyway. Okay, cool. Move-out inspection day comes and goes. We left the house in better shape than we found it, aside from a small area of torn carpet right along a seam in the doorway. The property manager inspected and said everything looked great and we should get our whole deposit back, $400, minus a few bucks for the torn carpet. Sounds good, boss. Enter a period of weeks where we waited and waited for our deposit, eventually leaving messages upon messages with false promises or no return calls at all. Eventually, over a month later, this culminated in a phone call with the property manager where he said, and I remember this almost verbatim, "I don't know what you're so worried about anyway. It's only like $200 you're getting back." He cited the painted nursery and the huge mess left behind as deductions, and I coldly informed him we'd be going to court then because we didn't feel we owed for those reasons. The place was spotless when we left, aside from the 6-pack of beer we left him in the fridge for being chill. Not 1 hour later, he called back and miraculously, our refund check had just shown up in the mail. Already knowing he was trying to screw us, we installed a recording app on my phone, we were in a one-party consent state, and went to the office. The check indeed was only for $200 of our deposit and included no list of what they charged us for, unimportant detail. We intentionally goaded him into admitting that he had told us not to paint and that the house looked great on move out and went on our happy way, revenge plan already unfolding. We didn't cash the check and instead emailed the CEO of the entire property company, copying in the property manager and detailing the entire process. The CEO sent back a smarty pants email with a cute little typed up list of deductions, including all the things we were specifically told we wouldn't be on the hook for. A fun detail was that even by his own math, they owed us $230 of our deposit. No one really had an answer for why they tried to issue a check for $200, but whatever. Joke was on him because we began digging through all the state regulations on security deposits and refunds, hoping to prove that our length of stay meant he couldn't charge us for wear and tear things like carpet cleaning, etc. And in our search, we instead happened upon a statute requiring landlords to return security deposit refunds and an itemized list of deductions within 30 days, or lose the right to withhold for actual damages and be subject to treble damages if the landlord is thought to be maliciously withholding the refund. So we typed up a demand letter for our entire security deposit, citing the statute, which he had broken because we didn't receive any refund offer or itemized list until 6 weekends later. And when he sent a smarty pants reply, we filed in small claims court for our entire deposit plus treble damages and court costs. Now, I don't know if it's clear at this point, but I can be really freaking petty if I feel like someone is trying to F with me. And it was clear this guy made a career out of stealing money from low-income renters who likely could never afford to fight it. I was pissed. I spent the next month before our court date compiling all email correspondence in which he'd screwed himself over numerous times by providing written documentation that he exceeded time limits, charged incorrect amounts, etc. I also compiled phone records showing dozens upon dozens of unanswered and unreturned calls to the property manager, and detailed accounts I'd made immediately after hanging up of lies from the property manager. I printed out a screenshot from the company's own website detailing the CEO's role as the legal advisor, so I could innocently claim, shouldn't he have known the statutes for these issues? I printed all the relevant statutes and highlighted the important parts. And then I made 3 freaking copies of everything. and nicely compiled each in a binder, complete with sleeve protectors and page numbers. One for our own reference, one for the butthole property manager and or the CEO. We weren't sure who would show up. And one for the judge himself. We also took our handy little recording of the property manager admitting to all the stuff he lied about and then pretending to have never said. Needless to say, the judge laughed at how prepared we were, asked if we were law students, and then awarded us treble damages and court fees as well as interest. I will never forget the CEO's face when we looked over and smiled at him. All his butthole emails and disregard for the law were on the table, and rather than giving us the original $350 or so we were promised from our deposit, he ended up paying us over $1,300 a month later. It was glorious. Oh shoot, edit. I completely forgot until my husband and I were just laughing hysterically about this. But the CEO also filed his response to our suit with a counterclaim for $1,225 for expenses incurred as a result of the actions of plaintiff. He never really said how he got that number, but in his last email before we sued, he did say, "I hope we can avoid litigation in this matter, but we will engage aggressively if forced to do so." Lol. I wasn't sure if people would love this story as much as I do, but here we are. So I'm including my husband's final email to the CEO before court. Man, he has a way with words. And I'm gonna read this email to you right now. Mr. Blank, this afternoon, we will be filing a case in small claims court against the corporation you represent, blank. By not returning our security deposit within 30 days of the end of the lease, without providing an itemized list of deductions within the same time period, you have violated codes such and such. You thereby forfeit any right to withhold any portion of the security deposit. Additionally, we are entitled to sue for up to 3 times the amount illegally withheld, unless you can show by a preponderance of the evidence that this was an accident. Our phone record showing well over a dozen unreturned phone calls, the fact that the check was not dated until the 6th of April, 7 days after the 30-day deadline, the fact that the check was not made available to us until the 16th of April, 17 days after the deadline, as well as the fact that your company deducted $200 from the deposit, despite having only $170 in documented damages, show quite clearly that this was not an honest mistake. We tried to deal with this outside of court, and we asked for only $382. Because of your failure to meet our reasonable requests, despite your obvious violation of the law, we will now be suing for $1,425. That's the $400 security deposit plus the $75 refundable pet deposit times 3, plus $18.91 for certified letter costs, plus interest on the amount owed determined by date of judgment, plus cost of the legal process, estimated $85. We tried to settle this amicably and for a small amount. Now we will settle this legally and for the maximum amount allowable by law. We have no desire to settle outside of court for any amount less than $1,425, plus all costs already incurred. There is no need for you to contact us. Sincerely, blank. Plus, we have a similar story down in the comments. Same thing happened to us. We had the move-in condition list that the screen was ripped and the carpet was in poor shape, plus receipts of 2 additional times asking them to repair the screen. Upon move out, we had a professional cleaner, a relative, who helped us clean. Plus, we took photos of everything pre-move in and post-move out. This sucky religious older couple, the praise Jesus types with religious iconography all over the office walls, managed the place. We went ballistic when they refused to give us our full deposit back. We took a drive to the property owner's corporate office and showed them everything. They started an investigation and found they had been ripping everyone off, not doing the required repairs, and pocketing the deposits. Mr. and Mrs. Jesus Freak were sentenced to 10 years in state prison. Fight back and always take photos. That was r/ProRevenge, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing because I am getting closer and closer to 1 million subs. And there might just be a special surprise waiting for you at 1 million subs.